Greetings. My name is Dr. Falashide Cromwell Solomon, and I am the principal investigator of the Embodied Physics Project, a collaboration between Turk, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and two community-based centers, Origination Cultural Arts Center and Roxbury Center for the Performing Arts. This work was funded by the National Science Foundation. Embodied Physics was the exploratory project that sought to address two main issues in informal science learning. One, broadening participation in science by exploring how to expand science access to Black and Latinx youth. And two, augmenting science learning in informal contexts, specifically learning physics in community-based dance sites. This project was comprised in three phases. The first being an exploration of learning in the context of robust informal arts-based learning environments in historically Black and Latinx communities. The second, to identify the best content and principles for embodied learning for science, specifically physics. And third, to integrate findings from the first two phases to create a 24-hour learning experience where youth investigate physics through embodied approaches and in culturally sustaining ways. This Journal of Learning Sciences paper expresses some of the work's most poignant findings.
Hello, I'm Dr. Dion Champion, and I'm here on behalf of myself and Dr. Falashide Solomon to share our project, Embodied Physics, utilizing the physical and cultural resources of dance for STEM learning and engagement. This poster explores how dance and dance-making practices can create spaces and opportunities for Black girls to bring cultural and embodied resources to physics sense-making. For Black girls, issues with access to physics often begin early, in learning environments where their resources and contributions are dismissed or excluded, and their vocally and physically expressive cultural practices are seen as behaviors to be policed rather than as resources for science learning. In this project, we studied how situated, embodied cultural practices of Black girls in physics learning environments provided resources for physics exploration, allowing for a shift from dominant conceptual framings of physics as acultural and disembodied to a physics that is personal, filled with affect and emotion, and grounded in cultural experiences and relational histories. We designed and examined an embodied physics learning lab, a dance learning environment that offered 15 Black teen girls opportunities to connect to physics through embodied imagining, representation, and kinesthetic experiences. In each session, the girls explored forces like gravity, the laws of motion, and the repulsion and attraction of objects, atoms, and elements by learning and improvising dance phrases, sharing weight with partners, and practicing and analyzing technical dance feats such as jumping and turning. Using interaction analysis, we analyzed video of activities specifically focused on moments when the girls worked collaboratively in groups to make sense of physics ideas. We used an expanded funds of knowledge framework to understand how ideational, cultural, and embodied aspects of dance served as resources for physics learning and engagement, and created new pathways of access to physics. We argue here for a view of funds of knowledge that goes beyond the resources that researchers typically acknowledge, things like personal, family, and community knowledge and experiences. Our definition introduces the body, movement, and embodied interaction as resources for learning and engagement. It includes ideational, material, cultural, and embodied resources. In the Embodied Physics Learning Lab, these resources included dance-making tools and technical skills, science knowledge and skills, and the creative process of dance-making, the characteristics of the learning environment, expressive movement, and the ways in which dancers' bodies interacted, and the teens' past and present relationships with one another through their community-based dance centers. These resources created moment-to-moment meaning-making opportunities for youth participants. For example, improvisational dance activities positioned movement as a form of inquiry, allowing for a deep exploration of the information and ideas represented in the periodic table. Through movement, the girls explored the periodic properties and differences between elements, considering how atomic numbers and electron configurations would affect the physical and chemical properties of each element. Positioning movement as a form of inquiry gave these dancers access to an expanded vocabulary for meaning making, providing opportunities to utilize dance making resources in conversation with the science ideas, and to communicate through symbolic devices and using spheres of communication such as specific movement qualities and dance styles like ballet. As shown here, there were many moments of the embodied hydrogen improvisation when dancers drew from the style of ballet to express the idea of hydrogen as light and airy. Ballet became an ideational resource that helped them make sense of the characteristics and properties of hydrogen. Next, we saw the dancers utilize kinesthetic resources. Youth were asked to explore gravity and force from their perspectives as dancers jumping with a partner to help lift and then rotate them in the air. They felt the forces acting on their bodies as they made sense of what was happening with and in their bodies between each jump. They also received feedback from the dance instructor and the physicist in the room. Keep your center, push into the ground, and the ground will push back. As they explored the kinesthetic experience of force and gravity on their bodies, they experienced laughter and joy that came with the surprise of jumping much higher when a lifting partner supported the jump. The activity allowed them to ground their reflections on gravity and the multiple forces that act on their bodies in the experience of jumping. Investigating the elements of the periodic table through dance provided a comfortable entry point, a familiar way of working, and an invitation to develop new relationships with familiar science resources. Material resources that are often presented in school as settled and static and represent the dominant epistemologies that have shaped physics teaching and learning in ways that have tended to marginalize Black girls. The periodic table was one such resource. When the periodic table was introduced as a resource in the context of a discussion about elements, molecules, and electrons, the girls initially had a strong negative reaction. In addition to yelling out, "No!" and "Put it away!" 3 of the girls turned their heads away from the facilitators and the paper, as shown here. Not only did their gaze shift, but they literally hid their faces. The girls' reactions demonstrate a negative association with the periodic table, a common material resource in high school classrooms. In this moment, it was not a meaningful material resource for them because they associated it with negative experiences from their science classes in school. Their resistance provided an opportunity for reframing their relationship to the periodic table and their understanding of what can count as a resource in science learning. The embodied activities that followed created space for their physical and cultural expressiveness, and in turn shifted their relationship not only to the periodic table, but to physics in general. As they grew more comfortable in the embodied exploration activities, dancers began drawing on movements from their own vernacular, movements from African diasporan dance styles, to express the element properties. When one dancer began a form of dance called crumping, a style that gained widespread popularity in Black communities in Los Angeles in the early 2000s, to represent the dense, heavy quality of iron, others joined in. Crumping spread among the group because it was a shared cultural resource among the girls, and because others recognized that it was deemed acceptable in this space. Rhythmic stepping was another such resource. The girls traded movements, enjoying each other's contributions with laughter and building on each previous movement. Crumping and stepping became powerful, expressive, embodied resources for the girls to connect with the physics material. It allowed them to fulfill the improvisational prompt in a way that carried a shared emotional meaning. When their resources were validated through facilitator feedback that honored their contributions, the girls brought in more culturally specific resources and were able to integrate those resources seamlessly. The opportunity to explore and express physics understanding through socially and personally meaningful cultural practices caused shifts in the girls' relationships to the physics content, their ideas about what parts of themselves belonged in the physics learning space, and in their experience of epistemic power. This work proposes a new way of seeing physics and a new lens for engaging in physics inquiry. Positioning dance as a form of inquiry allows room for youth to bring their own creative ways of moving. Examining the situated, embodied cultural practices of Black girls in these spaces helps us to understand the value of centering youth as vital to their own science learning experiences. It also pushes us methodologically to centralize the meaning making of Black girls outside of the oppressive white masculine norms of schooling.
We really appreciate you stopping by to learn a little bit more about our paper and our embodied physics project. For more information, you can contact us at dchampion@arts.ufl.edu or Falashade_Solomon at turk.edu.